Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Super-Fanta-Fi. This being a show where I talk about TV shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and/or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the season finale of Reverie. A great episode. A lot of things went down in this episode, so let's kind of break it down bit by bit. Obviously, one side of things, we have Mara and the whole Ray situation was very interesting. That whole thing played out a lot differently than I thought it was going to, because obviously for her, she wanted answers, and we kind of got a little more understanding of why Ray did what he did. Basically, it turns out he got fired from his job. He tried to keep it from Jamie because he was embarrassed. Then she found out, and it's like, oh, like she's leaving. It's because it's just a situation. It was like a lot of stress. It was that they were falling behind on bills and stuff like that, and she just kind of had enough because it's like, for one, he was lying to her that entire time, and for him, he felt powerless, and so he wanted to force her to listen to him. So the gun made him feel like he had control again, and things just went wild. Mara being there, the cops, he wasn't thinking clearly, and the only thought in his head was, we'd all be better off dead. And Mara's pissed because it's like, what gave you the right to make that decision for both of them, you know? It's like they're gone now. And this is all about, the reason why she's asking all these questions, because she needed to know, because for so long she's never been able to get like some closure to this situation, understanding why it would happen. Because the entire time, like, you know, Mara most likely blamed herself, because she's like, I didn't do enough to save them, so it's all on me, but I need to understand what pushed you to that point. And that's what that was all about. Even Ray, even finding out what Mara did, he's like, you didn't do that. She's like, what? No, I remember. He's like, no, you didn't force me to do anything. You just you just opened a door for me to do what I wanted to do anyway. Like, he's like, everything that happened was on me. I'm the one that has to deal with that punishment. Like, I don't blame you for anything. And I think that kind of probably leaves Mara a little conflicted, probably too. But obviously, this is all mixed in with the Alexis situation. So it's almost kind of going through a similar thing, because she goes home, her parents are like, oh, there's pictures of her, they're so proud of her little achievements. But there's only one picture, Dylan. I don't know why I said Daniel, Dylan. And I think for her, you know, she said to herself, it's like, it hurts because it's like her parents are trying not to remember Dylan. It's like, you have more photos of him, but you don't want to recognize it. It's like, it's always my birthday, but me and Dylan were twins. Like, we had the same birthday, but you never recognize that. But that's because, like, and you know, everyone handles things in their own way. Like, they try not to talk about Dylan because it was too hard. But for Alexis, she kind of internalized that, because they even say it themselves. It's like, because they didn't want her to feel more guilty than she already was, because that's what she did. She internalized everything. Them not talking about Dylan, it just makes her feel even more responsible for it, because it's like, yeah, she even built this artificial AI, and the fact of the matter is her parents don't want to talk to it, because it's like, that's not our baby. Our baby's gone. And they did their best, because it's like, they had you. She had such a brilliant mind. She was going places. She's going to do wonderful things in the world. And so they wanted to move forward with her. But, you know, even Alexis recognizes now, like, neither one of them moved on. Her parents haven't really moved on, because they kind of put their pain and stuff aside. They didn't grieve like they should have. They put their grief aside to make sure Alexis moved forward. And Alexis kind of like went grief adjacent, because she built the whole Dylan situation. So then we have Oliver, and we ultimately learn what Oliver is doing. Like, in his twisted mind, he's thinking, like, by stopping Alexis from doing this, he's stopping her, like, her Einstein moment of creating a atomic bomb. It's what Einstein's greatest regret was, and it's like, he's trying to prevent her from making that same mistake too. And it's messed up on so many levels, because it turns out, like, because for him, it's like all this stuff, he's like, oh, it's this, there's a problem with the Reverie, all those people not coming out, the derealization situation with me and Mara, and then there's the whole situation with, like, you giving it over to the government, which once again is like, for one, they've got Monica to kind of prevent the DOD from doing whatever they want to with it. But like I said, he's not really willing to listen to anything they have to say. They're dealing with the situation of, like, why the people are getting trapped in there. And it's like, are they really, because a lot of those people in these particular cases, like, these are people who have their own reasons for not coming out. So there's, like, more complexity to it than that. It's not as, like, simple as, like, oh, they're just stuck in there. You can make the argument, yes, but it's more so like they're dealing with their own stuff, which the Reverie is meant to. It's like holding on to them, letting them stay there for as long as possible, so that they can, like, deal with what they need to deal with, what kind of Mara does. But I'll kind of deal with that, kind of go back to that in a little bit. It turns out his plan is to overheat all the computers at first. That was kind of just an excuse to get him, but his point is to destroy Reverie. Because I figured that would be the point, like to basically burn it all to the ground is kind of what he said before, but I didn't know in what way he was going to go about. I was like, okay, it's like, oh, with all these 6,000 people inside, like with a whole bunch of people still inside of it, and it's like, oh, so is it to give bad press to the company? Which it would do that, yes, but more so than anything, it's to destroy everything that is Reverie. And if those 6,000 people die or get stuck inside, it's like, well, that's further proof of like sacrificing the few to save millions is his justification, which he kind of explains to Mara later on, just because in his mind it's like he's doing what is the greater good. Like, I have to do a little evil to do a lot of good in this particular situation. So luckily, Monica backed them up about this whole situation, so she gave them access to information they normally wouldn't gotten access to, and they were able to get to Alexis's body while Mara got to her inside that school maze. I thought was kind of fascinating. I'm having to chalk line on the doors to make sure, like, okay, which door did I go through? And I thought was so fascinating, the whole key situation. It's because, like, Reverie isn't some magic thing where you're just like, okay, you can pop in whatever. Like, while you're inside of Reverie, you can't just do whatever you want to. It's like you kind of have to meet it halfway. And for Mara, she had to focus. Think of that piece of the lamp she was sticking into the keyhole as like a key. It's like you remember the sensation of what it feels like to turn a key. And so the Reverie kind of meets her halfway because it's like her mind is visualizing it as a key, and the Reverie kind of balances that out by creating it into one. So I thought that's kind of like a nice touch. What was also interesting too, and maybe that came back later on, but I feel like it was never really explained, was maybe it's just tampering that Oliver did. But when like there was all that kind of like Alexis, like, the program was kind of getting a little screwy. She's like, yeah, I've never seen it do that before. It's like, maybe that's kind of hinting at something in the future, but kind of diving into this more. But Mara I figured it would come down to this. Like, I brought this up last episode. It didn't necessarily go down the way I thought it would, because I thought this might involve her parents, but it's like, no, it only involves Alexis, because he's like, oh, I'd never hurt you, Alexis, because she's like, what, are you going to kill me? It's like, no, I never hurt you. It's like, well, that's not very true. We kind of know two examples of, for one, you emotionally hurt her last episode when you showed her Dylan, but at the same time, you also tried to burn her house down. I don't remember if they actually talked about the fact that she was in the bed or not. I don't remember them ever saying that. It might just be like he burned her house down when he knew she wouldn't be there, so there's that, but still. Which apparently it also turns out he actually has an affinity for that, because apparently Alexis wasn't the first time he did that. He did that to some people at school, like all the people you see screaming on fire and stuff like that. I'm like, what the hell is up with that? I was like, are these people he killed in the fire? They might not have died in the fire. I don't know. I don't know if it was ever brought up that they died in the fire, but at the very least they were caught in the middle of it. It's actually kind of interesting too, because Alexis kind of points it out that basically that's what he sees in his head, that basically the BCI manifests what, because BCI kind of shows what you're kind of dealing with. And this was the only way for people to ever kind of see what was actually going on inside of Oliver's head, and kind of give them a physical example, show them like what he kind of has to see and deal with and hear, all the time in his head, And that's ultimately the sad thing about like what this is all about, because it's like they're trying. Mara tries to speak to him, because for him it's like, this is all because no one ever listened to him. Charlie didn't listen, Alexis didn't listen, the people at school didn't listen, because it's like my brain is wired a little bit differently, but yet no one's really listening to me. So he's doing whatever he can to prove a point, because like I said, in his mind, he thinks he's a hero, like he's doing the right thing, but at the same time it is something that he doesn't understand the fundamental aspects of this device, because he's not, it's not perfect, but I guess it's understandable too, because it's like no matter what he says, he's got this brilliant mind and everything, but even if he suggests like, oh, something's this, something's that, no one's going to really listen to him, because everyone's just going to chalk it up. It's like, oh, that's Oliver, he's delusional, don't listen now. I mean, we did see that about the derealization situation, and it literally came to be in Mara's case. I mean, whether it really came to be the case in Oliver's situation, that's just because of the way his mind is anyway. And it's crazy, because I mean, I think it's that situation of you have an easier time looking at someone else's situation rather than your own, because I think it's hard to say Oliver's situation is really a derealization situation. I think it is just more so it's all in his head type of thing, but still. They weren't able to completely stop him, because he does set the fire and he puts himself inside the Reverie. I don't know if they noticed that, because that never came up about like, oh yeah, Oliver's in a Reverie. I think they probably just think like maybe he passed out, so he secretly put himself in there, which would interesting. Luckily they were able to stop the fire, got everyone out, so there were no injuries other than Oliver, but it turns out he's still in that condition because they can't wake him up, but everything's A-okay. And this whole situation got a lot of people thinking very differently, like Mara, for example, because Ray couldn't remember what Bryn and Jamie looked like anymore. That's why he was like, he wanted to look because he wanted every time he chased after them in his dreams to apologize, he couldn't. And so in the end, Mara brings him a photo. And I guess at the end, that was enough to kind of finally get him to let go. That is just like, that was what he was holding on for so long because he couldn't remember the people he loved the most. He made this terrible mistake. And it's like, should he be forgiven for what he did? I don't know. I don't think so. But at the same time, it was just a sucky situation. I still feel like it's like you can't forgive him for what he did. And Mara's not necessarily doing that, but for her, it's like she's letting go. She spent so much time hating him and she doesn't want to spend the rest of her life hating him. So it's just kind of doing this kindness to him because it's like if she can help Ray, this man that she hates so much, then what's stopping her from helping anyone else, you know? So I thought that was kind of a nice touch. And then on the other side of things, you had the things with Dylan and Alexis, and we finally hear the explanation about what went down. And it was something that wasn't 100% her. It was not her fault at all. She was trying to get away from Dylan, wanted to be by herself, work on our project, and he ended up, falling when he was trying to find another way in. And she didn't realize till later, but by then it was too late. And I think an interesting thing is that maybe that's another reason why Alexis works so hard, because maybe in her mind also, like maybe to kind of punish herself even more, her work ethic, like her just being so busy of like, oh, I got this project in mind, I got to work on it, kind of played. I mean, she even talks about it a little bit too, because that incident has kind of made her like pull herself in. She shut herself down to other people because of it. Because for one, it's like that work ethic, probably maybe, like I said, some way of punishing herself, because she was so caught up in what she was doing then that it kind of manifested itself in that same shape or form now, because she kind of cut herself off from people. And the only person she got close to was Dylan, because he was her best friend. And she feels so responsible for him. So talking to Dylan was the only thing that made her feel good, because I guess it made her kind of forget about her pain. It made her feel good. But for her, she realizes she's not moving on. She's still holding on to the past. Like that, this Dylan is just, she's still holding on to that Dylan, that little boy. She never completely let him go. Like in her case, they let him grow up. It's like, I'm still keeping you as this little boy instead of letting you be what you can and should be, And so I guess like the Dylan we hear later on is kind of like, oh, this is who Dylan, like, it's like, yeah, we're here together. It's like, let's grow together. Like, I can't let you stay the little boy forever just for the sake of trying to hold on. It's like, you are gone, but you still are here with me no matter what. So let's go through things together. It's kind of a justification. I mean, not justification, but my understanding of it. And I thought that's kind of a neat thing of like, because it's almost like implying like, yeah, this is who my brother would kind of be if he was still around, and that no matter what, you can also think of it as like, yeah, that he's always with me no matter what. So things are moving forward. Alexis is even talking in front of a lot of the people. Like even over the course of the series so far, we've never seen her like publicly talk to a lot of people, like, at like the meetings and stuff like that, like in front of everyone that works at Neurotech, because I'm sure it's usually Charlie that kind of chalks that all up. And I thought that was kind of a pretty neat way of handling that. She's out there speaking, being very vocal about everything. Then there's the whole Paul and Mara thing really quickly. Like, it's like, oh, he's like, he's happy about her still working here and everything. It's like, oh, it's easy when it's someone you care about. I almost was like, oh, are you two going to kiss? Are you going to kiss? Also makes you wonder what's going to happen between the whole Mara and Chris thing, but maybe nothing, because that hasn't kind of circled back. But I'm like, oh, Paul's totally into you, but I don't know if Mara's like, he doesn't think he want to jeopardize their friendship. So I'd also completely forgotten about that too, that to talk about it, and I thought it was kind of an interesting thing, that basically one of Alexis's fears, like the Reverie can manifest it in different ways, because obviously it can create back doors, not only just your greatest dreams, but also your greatest fears, because obviously it created a room for Paul to deal with his situation, much like Mara had to deal with the situation with Ray, like subconsciously. Like Alexis's biggest fear is that what Oliver said was true, that her program will ultimately destroy people, but Mara was like, look at me. Like, the Reverie helped make me realize something I wasn't even sure of myself. Like, my subconscious knew, and the BCI was acting upon that, and the Reverie was acting upon that, and it made me realize something true. So it's like, the Reverie does help if it can help me out. There's so many people it can help. So know that what you're doing is making a good product, So I thought that was kind of pretty neat. So everything seems like it's firing on all cylinders. Obviously, it ends with, like I said, a lot of stuff still unanswered. Once again, I just don't know if they don't know, because I mean, he probably back channeled his way into it, but it's like they probably don't know that he's still somewhere in the Reverie, which is kind of interesting. You were planning on burning the Reverie down, so maybe that was his way of getting away from it, because it's like, at least this way he can, I don't know if it's, I would assume maybe it's a Reverie he built for himself or what. Did they not find it? Or because they never mentioned exactly like, oh, he's still something, like I feel like he would deal with that immediately, him running around the Reverie, but that's something we'll potentially deal with in the future. What's also interesting is at the end, Paul's like, yeah, it seems that it says that you're in the Reverie. And because at first I was like, oh, because I thought at the very end it's going to be like, oh man, he hacked into the system and he's messing with everything. It's like, because the way Paul was looking, it's like, nope, he noticed something. It turns out there's Mara in there. And so back in that particular Reverie, we see another Mara crossing at the door. So, and it's kind of like, I guess, like when it glitched at that moment when she was with Alexis, some part of Mara's consciousness, or I would assume, is kind of being trapped in there. Maybe it's the side of her that hated Ray. Maybe that's the side of her that's still there. That's why, like, she was able to forgive Ray so easily. I mean, at least handle things the way she did, is because that part of her that held on to that for 2 years, that hate, that blame for him, maybe that's the side of her that was still there. Once again, we still have the whole Oliver situation. So I'm very interested to see, like, what would that ultimately be, if that, like, what would that storyline be going forward? Because I think that'd be so fascinating to see, like, what that would also mean for, like, Mara, like, what that representation of that, because it's like, obviously there are still some bugs in the Reverie. There's people like, because once again, we still don't 100% know the effects of what happened to, like, there's some people there keeping their ions after the whole, like, shutting down the Reverie, or there's still people inside of it just because, but they're keeping monitoring on the people. But everything, it's been 3 weeks, everything seems okay except for this Mara situation. So that's because we also can't forget, like, Mara's kind of been the biggest exception of a lot of stuff, because a lot of stuff has kind of happened to her. First the wound situation, but then it's like, oh, Oliver suggested a way of fixing that. So it's like, is that completely fixed, or is that still an issue? What about the derealization situation? And also this Oliver situation. Can he mess anything up for me inside? I mean, because I don't know if he ever plans to come back on the outside, because like that would just mean being, for one, trapped in his body and 100% trapped in his own mind, at least in the Reverie. Potentially, maybe he can be free, but I still think like the BCI inside of his brain would still kind of manifest those what he would normally see on a daily basis. So I don't know, I'm very interested to see where that would go. Also, like, this whole Department of Defense situation, like, obviously we saw first steps kind of taken in that direction this season, but where would it go beyond this? Like, would it get to the point Monica has no say in it? Like, where the whole story would go, like what new Reveries we would get potentially in the future, stuff like that. I'm be very interested to see like what a second season would have in store for us. At the time of me recording this, I'm not sure if the show is coming back for a second season. I haven't seen anything official, just like quickly skimming things saying officially it's been canceled, but we'll wait and see, like, for something more official. So I think that's kind of seen as a good thing or a bad thing. And maybe that means they're still kind of up in the air what they're going to do with the show. So I really hope they do bring it back for a second season, because I'd love to see where it would take us, But really, that's all I want to talk about in this episode. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, love light to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and good